This is my continuing coverage of the health care bill. We are on page number 68. Now we're going to be talking about consultation. Now, it says, in issuing the regulations under paragraph 1, the Secretary shall consult with the National Organization or the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. In other words, when he's coming up with these regulations for the state exchanges, he's going to consult with these people before he implements his regulations. That way, he doesn't make all the decisions all by himself. And his members with the health insurance issuers. Okay, so he is not only going to consult with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, but he's also going to consult with health insurance issuers like Blue Cross Blue Shield and United Healthcare and so on and so forth. Consumer organizations, I'm not really sure what they mean by that, and such other individuals as the Secretary selects in a manner designated to ensure balanced representation among interested parties. State action. Each state that elects at such time and in such manner as the Secretary may prescribe to apply the requirements described in subsection A shall not, later than January 1st, 2014, adopt or have in effect the federal standards established under subsection A or a state law or regulation that the Secretary determines implements the standards within the state. So in other words, those who decide to set up a state exchange, they have to have everything set up by January 1st of 2014, which has just passed. Okay. All right. Failure to establish an exchange or implement requirements. This is if the state decides not to set up an exchange or they don't get everything all set up by January 1st, 2014. In general, if the state is not an electing state under subsection B, in other words, they decide they don't want to set up an exchange, the Secretary determines on or before January 1st, 2013 that an electing state will not have any required exchange operation by January 1st, 2014, or has not taken the actions the Secretary determines necessary to implement the other requirements set forth in the standards of whatever. The Secretary shall directly or through agreement with a not-for-profit entity establish and operate such exchange within the state, and the Secretary shall take such action as are necessary to implement such other requirements. In other words, if the state does not set up its own exchange, then the Secretary will set up an exchange within that state, pretty much superseding the state. That's not nice. Oh well. Anyway, that's what's said on page number 68. Enforcement authority, page 69. The provisions of section 2736B of the Public Health Services Act shall apply to the enforcement under paragraph 1 of requirements of subsection A1 without regard to any limitations on the application of those provisions to group health insurance plans. In other words, section 2736B will be how they will enforce the state exchanges. No interference with state regulatory authority. Nothing in this title shall be construed to preempt any state law that does not prevent the application of the provisions of this title. Presumption for certain state-operated exchanges. In general, in the case of a state-operating exchange before January 1st, 2010, and which has insured a percentage of its population not less than the percentage of the population projected to be covered nationally after the implementation of this act, that seeks to operate an exchange under this section, the Secretary shall presume that such exchange meets the standards under this section unless the Secretary determines, after completion of the process established under paragraph 2, that the exchange does not comply with such standards. In other words, some of these states already have exchanges, and as long as they're compliant with what the Secretary of Health and Human Services says, he's pretty much going to leave them alone. The Secretary shall establish a process to work with a state described in paragraph 1 to provide assistance necessary to assist the state exchange in coming into compliance with the standards for approval under the section. Wow. So in other words, if a state decides not to operate its own exchange, the federal government will operate an exchange within that state. The end. Okay. We are now on page set number 69. I will tell you more in a future video. Stay tuned.